Well, hi everyone. Good morning and welcome to week 9. It's great to see you all. Thanks for picking up all your materials. This week we will review assessment. There are a few important details I really want to make sure that you have a good understanding of, so we'll take a minute and cover those. We will not jump ahead to Chapter 7, which begins listening and speaking. I'd like to spend another week on assessment. It's a really key component to effective EAL teaching, to any teaching. I want to make sure you have a good grasp of it. It's important that you understand it and that you know how to apply it effectively. So let's take a couple minutes. We'll review the key aspects in Chapter 6, and then I'll go over the agenda, and we'll talk about a little bit about the nicest slat and what else is upcoming. Also, I know I told you I was going to give you some type of pop quiz on key terms, but in asynchronous online teaching, that is really tough. I don't know how to design that. I'm still thinking of something, so just be prepared. Anyway, so your vocabulary comes up this week. Make sure that you understand it and that you know how it applies to EAL teaching. The chapter opens up with a lot of vocabulary in terms that all of you should be familiar with, and I'm confident that you are. So if you're not, take the time to make sure that you understand the difference among the vocabulary: testing, assessment, and evaluation. I know that you all understand summative, assessment, and formative. If you don't, really take a minute and understand it. This is something that you need to demonstrate not only in the classroom here in our teacher education program, but you need to demonstrate it in your student teaching, in OPEs, and on EdTPA. So make sure that you are familiar with those terms. Let's see. And then, of course, it talks a lot about reliability, validity, bias, testing norms, standards, content area testing, just topics that you should be familiar with, but it's okay if you don't have a comprehensive understanding. As long as you have a superficial understanding of what these are, then that's sufficient. I do want to jump ahead to what's valuable here in EAL is language proficiency testing. And in New York State, for our language proficiency testing assessment, we have the nicest SLAP. And I pulled up the website here, and you can see here's the website link, and over here is the New York State website for the nicest SLAT. So it's New York State English as a Second Language Achievement Test, we call the nicest SLAT. And what this does is it's the annual assessment of students' proficiency. So when you get your caseload of EAL students, you give them the nicest SLAT, and unfortunately, it's sent away now for assessment to be graded, but you actually give it and you sit with them and you work with the students. So what I'd like you to do is just take some time and look at the sample test, read the website, look at some of the webinets. I guess I thought they were webinars. And then they even have sample items. So if you look at the sample items here, and let's just take a 5-6 speaking, you can open it up. It'll give you, it should give you, hold on, here it is. It'll give you the question, and here is the information, and then it'll give you the rubric, and we're going to talk about rubrics here in a couple minutes. So just take a minute and look at the nicest slit so you have an understanding of what it is and what it entails and the types of questions. And of course we give it K through 12. So open up a few of them, take a look at it, just see what it looks like. So that is our language proficiency testing in New York State. You'll know it well once you get your permanent full-time jobs. Is it accurate? I would say it's fair. It really depends on the testing conditions. It depends on the person who's administering the test. Some of the questions aren't really, I would say, although they're supposed to be culturally sensitive, they're not really culturally sensitive. especially if you look at some of the kindergarten pictures. So again, the more that you familiarize yourself with it, the more you understand what it takes to really try to get a fair assessment on proficiency. Actually, once you give the test and you sit with your students, you'll have a better idea very quickly of their proficiency level, well before New York State returns that, quote, proficiency level back to you. But this is something that you'll be required to do. All right, so let's go back to our course. All right. Okay, next I want to talk about, especially for EAL, is performance assessment. And a lot of our assessment is performance-based assessment. So you're looking at the whole accomplishment of the student. And it's a form of observation that's more structured because you'll have an observation, but performance assessment is really based on a structured assessment of a complete project or activity from beginning to end that usually includes the 4 skills. So it's really suitable for EAL students. And we see performance assessment models really scored on a rubric. Oh, rats. Hold on one sec. Sorry about that. So for rubrics, the reason why rubrics are super effective is because students can see the expectations up front. Your faculty right now, a lot of the faculty uses rubrics, and you've seen them for projects. You can see what's expected, and the performances are easier to rate. So this is something, a tool that you'll begin to use, and I'd like you to start learning to develop. So I have some examples here, and of course you know the rubrics, you've seen them before, your professors have used them, and maybe you've even used them. But let's see. Here, hold on one sec. Okay, before we look at this one, I'd like you to look at your book on page 141. And they give you a sample. Here it is, 141. Can you see that? And you all have your book. Most of you have the book. There it is. There it is. And there's a sample of a rubric. And this rubric is on a 1 through 4 scale. And it really clearly explains the expectations for the 4, which is, of course, the strongest. Title's creative and clearly relates to the problem being graphed. And then it goes down. Title's present at the top, title's not present, yada, yada, yada. So the rubric is great because you can sit down with your students, say, okay, this is what's expected. This is where I would hope you to be on the rubric. And this is how you get to the higher end of the rubric. Then on here, I pulled up, there's a lot of examples of rubrics here, and I just pulled up one right here on Google, and this rubric goes from beginning, developing, accomplished, and exemplary, a 1 through 4, and the same thing. Description is just beginning level, movement towards mastery. On the rubric, you want it to be clearly described and understood the difference between each level. So here's one example, and then you can go over, let's see, I think this one's hard to see, but here's another example. And of course, we have examples on our NYSESLAT has rubrics as well. So when you go back here, they'll have the rubrics. So does EdTPA. They all have rubrics. So the rubric is a really good assessment for performance-based assessment activities. That was a little bit redundant. If you didn't spend the time on this area in the book, starting on page 140, go back and really read why it's valuable and important. And then what we're going to do this week is I'd like you to create a rubric for an assessment of a lesson plan that you're going to write. So, hold on one sec. So here's a type of rubric that's pretty simple. I find that 5 columns is a little too much for a rubric. I don't like that many. I kind of like this idea of maybe no attempt or no ability, then beginning or attempting to meet standards, and then exceed standards. Kind of like that type of 4 rubric. Some people like the 3: below standards, meet standards, above standards. It's up to you what kind of rubric you like, and it's really based on your own experience and what you would like to design for your students. The reason I want you to begin now is because good teaching is based on fair assessment. And if you can deliver a lesson and assess the student's performance accurately, then 1, you'll know how your students are doing, and then also you know how you're doing. If all your students are really low on that performance assessment, then you know, okay, hey, maybe I missed the mark. Maybe I'm the one that failed this. Same thing. If they're really off the charts, then you say, okay, this is great. I know I've hit this, this, and this. Maybe I want to make things more challenging. Either way, it's a good assessment for both teaching and learning. Also, we'd like to begin to see it in the classroom, and EdTPA likes to see it. So I think if we begin to create rubrics now, that you'll become more comfortable as we put you out in the field for student teaching and then prepare for EdTPA. So you can surf the internet and look for rubrics that you like the language, that you think would be appropriate for EALs, that you like the scoring level. And some rubrics go 0 to 4 or 5 from left, and others go 0, 4 to 5 to right. So decide what you like and find something that maybe you could use, consistently for your career. So based on that, let's go back to our course here. What I'd like you to do, let's see. Oh, and then we have portfolio assessment. Okay, everything else you know in the chapter. So what I'd like to focus in on is performance assessment using a rubric. That's what we're going to do this week. You need a lesson plan and an activity in a class to create this assessment. So I'd like you to use this teaching demo, math field trip, number of buses. There's this teacher, and she's teaching a group of middle school students, and it's mixed mainstream students and some EAL students. It's urban setting, and she's teaching them how to solve a math word problem, and it's like so many kids are going on a bus to a field trip. Each bus carries 8 students, and I don't know, there's 42 students, and they're trying to figure this out. What I'd like you to do this week is to write the lesson plan that matches this lesson, keeping in mind that it is content-based, and the only modification that you'll make is that all your students are going to be EAL students. But let's say you have a group of 10. You're going to have a lot of students here. And you're going to write the lesson that matches this activity, and then I'd like you to create an assessment rubric. And the performance assessment will be based on their understanding of a word problem. So you really have to think about, do you want language? Do you want production of language? Do you want math? Do you want participation? Again, it's up to you how you're going to create this rubric. Is there a wrong or right? No, not really. This is probably one of the, I don't know if you've done it. I don't think you've done it before. But I just want you to practice, and let's see what our rubrics look like. What you're going to do is, once you create your rubric, I'm going to have you post it on a discussion board. And then next week, we're going to talk about these rubrics. So you're going to post your rubric up on a discussion board. I haven't put that up there. Yeah, so you have to do the lesson plan first and then create the performance assessment rubric based on this. Okay, so I'll just show you a couple minutes so you know what you're getting into.
How many more people are still left to go on a bus? 20.
I have to do 20 minus 8.
So you're only going to bus 3.
Yeah. How do that 21 people?
We started with 36 people. The first 8 people got on a bus. So now there's 28, right? So now 28 people, the next 8 people get on a bus. And now there's 20. Does that work?
Yes.
Can I keep going?
Yes.
Okay, so let's do what?
20 minus
20 minus 8 equals 12. So how many